So we've got a very special guest today. We've got Jill with us. Jill is here as a business developer at Inventory Planner, an amazing app that a lot of our clients have actually been using. And the reason we initially got in touch, I think some of our clients actually connected us, which I found really interesting, that there are solutions out there to manage those kind of cash flow problems, and getting better at managing your inventory. So what's interesting about Jill is that she's walked the walk, right? So she was running her own e-commerce business, and she has transitioned out of that when she found out how many other e-commerce owners are suffering from similar demand forecasting and inventory planning issues. So welcome, Jill, again, and super excited for today.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to kind of geeking out on this stuff. I think it's a really big deal for e-commerce merchants. Merchants of any size can benefit from demand planning, but especially stores that are scaling, that are reaching, let's say, $500,000 to $1 million in annual revenue. There's kind of a breaking point of operationally, maybe we were doing things with spreadsheets before and we need to figure out a different way because it's breaking, or we know we're not covering all our bases. So I think that there are some, techniques and some things to keep in mind that we'll go through today that help any merchant, and then really how to level up and help scale your business too.
Yeah, we've already touched upon what can happen if you're not implementing proper inventory planning. So this is super, super important, especially if you're doing $500,000 to $1 million a month and you're still using spreadsheets, right? So Jill, looking forward to hear your story. Please tell us how from an e-commerce owner, professional, crazy pet lady selling pet products, you transitioned into doing business development for Inventory Planner.
Yeah, so I took over an e-commerce brand about 6 years ago now. That brand had been around for 20 years, so really old in internet terms. I mean, started before Amazon did, way back, and really had seen some good success over the years. But then I think as the market got a lot more crowded, and just struggles that a lot of brands face, things were going in a downward direction revenue-wise. And so it was really a question of like, how do we turn this around? We think that there's a strong following for this brand, good products. What can we do here? And so part of that journey was figuring out our inventory situation. So just to paint a picture of what that looked like at first, we had no system whatsoever. We would walk around in the warehouse and look at shelves and say, oh, that shelf is empty, so it looks like we should order something. But it's not like we had one particular thing in that spot, so we knew what was out even. I mean, it was really bad. Just no system whatsoever. We were totally guessing at what needed to be ordered. So obviously that's got to change. Simultaneously, we just did not have good data into what was happening in the business. So we didn't know what was most profitable. We didn't even know, on a per item basis, what our profits were. I mean, very, very basic business intelligence, right? Like that is where you start, is what's our profit? So through some different staffing changes, it turned out that ordering inventory was my job. And so I needed to figure something out. And so I started looking around. At that point, I found Inventory Planner and started getting into the system a little bit more, learning about best practices, getting some insight into our products, so that we could see not only what our profits were, but we could see that our most popular line that we were selling at the time, we were selling at a loss. I mean, it was really bad. So obviously we needed to raise prices. That's a critical thing. You can see why it was our most popular line. If we were selling it at a loss, we might have had competitors sourcing from us. I mean, it was ugly. And so we needed to figure out what our prices needed to be, what we need to order, and when we needed to order it. So we need not just to say, oh, we're out of this, so we should order, but we need to order in time so that it can be made, it can be shipped to us, we can receive it, and not have any break in the action in terms of inventory. So it was a total game changer for us. Fast forward 4 more years after that, and we were able to sell our business. So not only did we not go out of business, we were able to sell the business. And there was a lot that we learned along the way. So we identified a lot of overstock. We figured out what we did need to order. We had some good insights into products so that we could launch private labels. We could bring inventory in-house. And I think we'll get into, a lot more detail on kind of these strategies. But the important part is we were going to run out of business, and we turned that around and we were able to sell the business instead. So once we sold the business, I was kind of looking around and figuring out what I wanted to do, what I really enjoyed. I was already telling people about Inventory Planner years before I ever thought about joining the team. So I emailed the founder of Inventory Planner and I just said, you already know that I love your system. Do you need any help? So fortunately he said yes, and I was able to join the team a couple years ago. So it's been really fun because now I just get to hang out with other merchants and talk about their inventory issues, and we get to work on making their businesses better. So it's a pretty good time.
Amazing. That's such an inspiring story, and I think inventory planner guys are really lucky to have somebody so experienced firsthand with the issues. Of the inventory planning. Yeah, so let's talk more about this process and the most common mistakes that stores typically make when it comes to demand forecasting and their inventory and getting cash flow tied in inventory.
Definitely. So there's a couple of things to think about, and I've got some slides here, so let me just share that over. All right, so there we go. Here's a picture of my dog from my crazy dog lady days. So in thinking about sales forecasting, the thing that we're doing is thinking about what past behavior will predict future patterns of customer demand. So I think on the face, it's very simple that we're saying, okay, yeah, we're going to use past sales to figure out what people want in the future. Going just a little bit deeper on this, we're figuring out what is the relevant period in the past to look at for that. So if we're looking at really trendy items, it makes sense to look at the last 14 days or the last 30 days, so that we're very reactive to what's happening on that. But if we have a seasonal item, I don't really care what happened 30 days ago. I care what happened a year ago. So really think about what's my reference period? What data am I putting in to figure out what my rate of sales is? So keep that in mind to figure that out. Then let's fast forward a little bit here. Okay, so one of the keys that we're really trying to get to is how many units are we selling when we have items in stock? So it's important to think about, when was I in stock? When was I out of stock? If I'm out of stock, I need to kind of exclude those days because customers couldn't buy anything during that time. So if I'm not excluding those days, then I'm going to be under forecasting what the true demand is. I'm going to run out of inventory again. And then you're in this vicious cycle of what's going on. So think about not just average sales per month as an example, but think about average sales when you're in stock. So if we think about an example, if I sell 30 units in a month, if I was just looking at all the days, it'd be 1 unit per month or per day. But if I was out of stock half the month, then I'm really selling 2 units per day. So you can see how it makes a huge difference in terms of the rate of sales to think about, when am I in stock, when am I out of stock? That's one thing that I think people commonly overlook. And so you just get stuck in this bad cycle of constantly running out when you think you're accurately calculating the demand. Then we talked a little bit about thinking about what kind of products do I have? Is it seasonal? Is it not seasonal? Is it really trendy? Is it not? So it's not like everything in your store is probably going to need the same either forecasting method, or if you're doing this with a spreadsheet, the same formula applied. You could have seasonal and non-seasonal items is a really common situation. So think about, what's my reference period? How much data should we be looking at in that respect? And then just kind of the third and the last point that I would point out, we're trying to think about this in a really dynamic way. So something that people commonly ask about is, but how do I build in a safety stock? And by safety stock, they're saying, okay, I want to have kind of 5 units on hand extra at all times, because maybe my supplier isn't shipping on time, or there's a pandemic and shipping goes haywire all over the world. That could happen. So they're thinking about these 5 units. But the thing is, if you're doing other things right in your business and demand is growing, that 5 units won't be relevant at some point, and you're going to have to go back and maintain it. So think about using this as a rate of sales. I want to build in, for example, maybe I want to have 30 days of our stock on hand at all times. Maybe I build that in and I calculate it as 35 or 40 days. That's going to be dynamic with our rate of sales. So as demand for that product grows, then we'll build in a buffer that's relative and is going to help us out to kind of avoid some of those shocks to our supply. So those are some main things that I would point out just as you're getting started thinking about your forecasting, so that you are making sure to calculate your demand correctly and really hone in on more accurately how much do customers actually want in that case. Mm-hmm. So we'll kind of take a breather there.
Absolutely. So how do you typically decide how many days of stock do you want to hold? I believe that businesses have different kind of risk tolerance, and certain situations are just impossible to predict, just like the pandemic that we're in now. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice on what's the good kind of like a sweet spot to hit in terms of how many days of stock do you want to hold?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head in terms of risk tolerance. So just as a general place to start, we usually start with 30 days and say, okay, if we have a month's worth of stock, what does that look like? Now, things that can complicate that is your risk tolerance. It can be your cash flow situation. How much cash do you have available? It could be shipping issues. The cost of shipping is one thing to keep in mind. If you have really high shipping costs for an item, maybe you want to do fewer shipments and kind of spread out those shipping costs rather than doing lots of smaller shipments that would really rack up those shipping costs. So those are kind of some complicating factors to keep in mind. There's also vendor considerations like minimum order quantities, case sizes, things like that could artificially kind of bump up how much you're ordering when you really don't want to order that much. Maybe to meet minimums, you have to order 60 days instead of 30 days worth of stock. Another technique, so this is interesting that you asked about that. So that was actually my next slide there. So in our system, we have people enter, okay, what's my lead time, which means how long does it take between placing my purchase order and then getting our stock. And then days of stock is kind of thinking about, how much do I want to have on hand? So that's another thing to think about. One more technique that you can do is to rank or triage your inventory. Not all of your inventory is equally important to your profits. So there's something called an ABC analysis, and things in A class are basically what's contributing to your first 80% of your revenue. So kind of the fewest number of SKUs that you can put together to get to 80% of your revenue, that's A class. And that can be your priority items, the ones that you never want to run out of stock on. So that's what you're keeping an eye on to replenish first. B class is the next 15%, and then C class is the final 5%. And maybe with that C class items, there's a couple of things there. One, you're okay with occasional stockouts because they're not contributing a lot to your profit. But then two, maybe you look at actually eliminating those items. It could be that the time to kind of maintain and replenish those is just costing you more than you're getting out of it. So you can think about kind of maintaining your catalog of products by eliminating those items. So that's a couple ways you can think about what's most important, where do I start, and then kind of working out from there to where you might be okay with some occasional stockouts on other items.
I love this approach because I find that a lot of stores have way too many SKUs, and they're just literally legacy items, and they're just sitting there. They have just a few items on stock. Nobody ever buys them pretty much. And, it's also distracting customers. So you have to remember about the paradox of choice. If you're giving people too much choice, you're actually paralyzing them, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think this brings up a great point, and something that I was absolutely guilty of, when I was running our store, is think about what your standards are. Like, what is your threshold? The threshold for a successful product is not one sale ever. That doesn't pay the bills. Like, you got to think about setting some higher levels of what kind of revenue do we really need this to bring in to make it worth our while? Like, think bigger. Think like a bigger merchant, especially if you've built something from the ground up and you saw those first few sales like trickling in. Kind of reset your frame of mind to think like a bigger merchant and say, do I have to be selling 100 units of these a month, or whatever might be relevant to that next plateau that you're trying to get to? So I think that's a great point to bring up.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm okay. So it sounds like you guys, you're showing a little bit about the variables that are important in terms of measuring the forecasting the stocks here. So do you have any more demo to show, or shall I continue with questions?
Yeah, I think that we can hear. This is one slide that I wanted to point out. So in Inventory Planner, we've got over 175 different metrics that you can look at, which honestly is data overload for a lot of people at the beginning. So I think, it's kind of boiling it down and thinking about what's most important. Where do I start? If I have one metric that matters, or, what do I keep my eye on? In terms of trying to figure out what to order, I think that these metrics that I'm showing here, probably replenishment profit, if I had to pick one, that's what I'd look at. So basically this is saying, we've calculated our forecasted demand. We've figured out how many units we need to replenish. Then this is showing, if I multiply that number of units that I'm suggested to purchase by our profits, what am I going to get out of it? So basically that replenishment profit is looking at what's our return on investment for buying this inventory. So this is obviously going to be better than replenishment retail, because it could be on that top line, if I'm spending $430,900 on one item, but I have, a 1% profit on that, that's a lot of work to not get much out of it. So keeping an eye on that profit and what we're going to get out of that investment, and how quickly, do I get that in 30 days? Does it take me 2 years to get to that? So that's where we're thinking about cash flow and like how quickly we're getting that return on investment there. Yeah. So I think we've talked a lot about replenishment, not running out of stock. That's definitely the first order of business, is like plugging that hole so that we're not missing that opportunity. Once that's under control, then we typically look at overstock. So we're looking at how overstocked are we? We have a planning period. So that was basically our lead time plus how long we want that new order to last, our days of stock. How much stock do we have after that time? So you can see here that we've got kind of a variety of information. So one item will sell out in 2 months. Not great, but maybe that's not horrible compared to these other ones that are going to last for 18 months, which actually is the ceiling of our program. So they're going to last longer than that probably. That's our priority to clear out, because it is cash sitting on our shelves in our warehouse, but it's not liquid. We can't do anything with it. We can't pay the rent with it. We can't pay salaries with it. We can't invest in marketing with it. We got to clear it out so that we can do something more profitable with it, more productive with it. So first get replenishment under control, then look at overstock. And we can get into strategies for clearing out overstock too. There's some interesting things that can happen here.
Yeah, let's for sure do that, because I see that this is the money maker for a lot of e-com businesses, because you can find, especially if you're working with marketing team, we marketers, we love bestsellers. We can focus on them all day long. But if you've got 18 months of stock sitting in your warehouse, completely unproductive, then that's potentially cash that could be reinvested into further scaling and faster scaling, right?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Like you can, if you know this, you can communicate to your marketing guys, sell me this stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely. And this is where you can get creative with things, because I think with overstock, we might quickly go to, oh, I've got to discount it to get it out of here. But there's some other strategies that we can try first. So you could try to bundle it with a hot seller and say like with free gift, or, like upsell into something that might be complimentary. It's like repackaging, so put your marketing people on that, and think about reimagining, like, can we kit these together? Can we bundle these together to try to get them out of here at full profitability? That's ideal. That said, don't be too stingy in trying to get your overstock out of the warehouse. That's a mistake that I definitely made. I think if I was to go back to be a merchant again, that I would be much more aggressive for clearing out overstock. Just the cash potential of getting it out of there now is, even at a discount, is the opportunity. It's an opportunity cost issue. Like, do I want to squeeze every penny out of it, but take 2 years to get it out of here, versus take some loss, but have the cash right now and grow my business right now, So think about how aggressive versus conservative you're being about clearing out that overstock. There's some other, kind of continuing on the bundle angle. There's some interesting things I've seen around bundling items, and this doesn't have to just be on overstock, but could be, where if people are presented with too many options, they make no decision and they just leave. So they just get kind of paralyzed by indecision. So what we found in our store, and I found with a prior business of mine as well, is to just like slim down those options and you improve the conversion rate. So as an example, we sold dog bones, right? So we were selling, you had an option to buy 1, 3, 6, 9, I don't know. We had like 6 or 7 different quantity options that you could purchase. And we figured out operationally, well, these come, we could sell singles, but these also come in boxes of 15s and 30s. So those are going to be our 3 options: singles, 15s, and 30s. That's what you can buy, because it'll make fulfillment easier. We can just grab a box, slap a label on it, and it goes out the door, right? That's faster than counting these out every time. So we slimmed it down. We made just 3 options for bulk buying. Our conversion rate went up. We didn't have anything close to the 30 unit option before. People bought the heck out of that. So we were going through a lot more. Our operational costs were lower because fulfillment time was lower, shipping costs was lower. So think about your bundles and presenting that in a way so that people don't get paralyzed by too many decisions as well.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. This is the replenishment screen. This is just kind of going through in our system how to create a purchase order. So we've got some replenishment recommendations, then clicking on create the purchase order. We've got some options for minimum order quantities, case sizes. You can manually edit that in the system. And so anyway, this is just kind of a looping image to show creating those purchase orders. Then from our system, you can email that directly to your supplier. You can download it in a variety of formats and things like that. So we really, one, try to help with the accuracy of forecasting, but then also part of the point is saving merchants time. Like there's just not enough hours in the day. So we want to streamline this for people, help out with this process, and you can spend your time and attention elsewhere in your business too. So saving money and saving time, that's the point here. So we've got some other reports, but we can get into that eventually. But I think, the bulk on the forecasting is really like identifying opportunities to have more stock, identifying opportunities to have less stock to improve that whole cash flow situation, and then streamlining the whole ordering process is in a nutshell kind of what we help out with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is really cool. I also wanted to chat, so let me know if this is a good time or if there's some, because I'm really curious to know more about the inventory planner itself. First time I'm seeing this from this perspective. So, but my question is, I guess, some of our audience is also doing some drop shipping, and actually we are with one business in the point where we are now kind of moving back into this mixed kind of hybrid model where, we want to hold some stock ourselves to maximize to kind of, minimize shipping times.
Yeah.
on the best sellers, but at the same time have retained the flexibility of drop shipping for the different SKUs or even the same orders when, you know, when we run out of the stock that we have. So how can Inventory Planner, what would you recommend for this kind of setup, and can Inventory Planner help in that regard as well?
Yeah, so Inventory Planner is best suited for when you're holding physical inventory and needing to replenish what you're holding on hand. If you're looking for a system to automate, you know, a customer purchased something and you need to pass that along to your dropshipper to place an order, a system that I've used is called Duoplane. I have no affiliation with them. I tried to sign up as a partner, you know, so I get nothing out of this plug. Duoplane is a great system for that. Duoplane can really streamline that so that you're spending less time and have fewer errors getting that to your dropshipper. That said, Inventory Planner can help with the business intelligence part of things. So one thing that I did as a merchant, we also had a hybrid model where we were drop shipping some things and then carried physical inventory for others, is look at how those drop shipped items are performing. So, you know, we would sell dog collars, let's say as an example, in 6 different colors. The drop shipper might even have more colors than that, right? Well, we can get a sense from the drop shipping how those perform. So maybe the black, the red, and the green are the best sellers, and we don't need to bother with the yellow and the orange. So that could eventually be stock that we bring in-house. You can talk to that same supplier and say, you know, for better profit margins, could we bring it in-house, right? Because we're taking on the risk by holding the inventory, but we also know what the best sellers are. So you can kind of hone in and like use the drop shipping to road test what that looks like and then bring it in-house. You can also use reporting in Inventory Planner to really say, you know, what are the attributes that sell well, and then potentially launch your own private label lines. You know, so in our case, if we were going to launch some dog treats, we could look at what are the best flavors of what we sell across the board right now. You know, and maybe beef is the top seller. And so when we start out with our own private label, we know we need to start with beef because that's what our customers respond to. So I think operationally is one question. And then the business intelligence of, you know, what kind of insights can we get from this can really help you minimize some of that risk when you're bringing on new products, whether that's private label or somebody else's brand.
Yeah, so basically you're keeping the two systems separate, right? Where you're drop shipping the products to validate the ideas, and then you're taking stock in-house and you're using Inventory Planner to manage the stuff that you've got on stock, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's kind of 2 parts to Inventory Planner. One is that part we walk through where we're actually creating the purchase orders. And then we've got reporting. So that's what you see on the screen now. This is a report that I worked up by category. So the dresses here are a category. And then you can see under period, we're looking at 5 different weeks stacked on top of each other. And then in the sales difference and the revenue difference percentage columns, we can see what's the difference from one week to the next. So if you sell really trendy items, this is really, you know, an interesting thing to keep an eye on to see if you're seeing spikes or drop-offs here. But along the lines of the business intelligence, you know, we can look at option sets. So that means size, color, flavor, any of those drop-downs you have on your product page, those are option sets. We can look at that across lots of different products and say, how do these perform overall? And that's how we figure out whether we're drop shipping or we keep it in-house. We've got all that sales data in Inventory Planner too. So we can take a look at how are these performing across the board, maybe what inventory should we cut from our catalog, like you said, you know, so customers don't get distracted too.
Yeah. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah. So one other thing that I'd point out here. So one thing that I always needed was the cost value of our inventory to give to our bookkeeper on a monthly basis. Before Inventory Planner, that was a guess. Hopefully there are no repercussions to me saying that now. We were guessing, but once we had accurate stock counts, we have accurate costs in the system, then we can see what the cost value is of our inventory at any time. And then we can go back in time, you know, starting with when we've created an account in Inventory Planner to look at that value historically as well. So your bookkeeper will love you for that alone. That's definitely a helpful thing. We've got some other reports around, historical receiving, as well as looking into the future of when purchase orders are expected to arrive. So that can help to coordinate with your receiving or warehouse department. They need to know what's coming in when. So this report we're looking at is the historical version. We've got a complement to this that's forward looking. So it looks at open purchase orders by supplier. So it just helps to get everybody on the same page and make sure that you're figuring that out. So so we can definitely get into actual inventory planner itself. We've got a live demo site. Just a couple of things that we've got as results. So the store that I ran, we improved our stock turn by 8x, which means that from bringing in inventory to the time that it's going out, that's one stock turn. So by decreasing the overstock we had, by being a lot more precise about what we're ordering and when to match what people wanted, we can improve that by 8x, and that has a direct effect on your cash flow. That means it's not tied up anymore. It's flowing better. So that was a big win for us. And then another store that I've worked with, I was talking about cost value of inventory, and they decided that instead of, let's say, 45 days of stock on hand, they wanted to have 30 days of stock on hand. So they started ordering a lot more often and in smaller amounts. They have very trendy items, and so this worked well for them so that they could be a lot more responsive to what their customers wanted. And in 6 weeks, they were able to bring down the total value of their inventory by $1.5 million. I don't know about you, but that's a big deal for cash flow, I think, to happen that quickly. So that just means they have $1.5 million that's liquid now, and it wasn't before. So that's what having the data and being a lot more precise can really get for you in terms of demand planning.
Yeah, so, absolutely. I can only imagine what I would do with 1.5 million when it comes to if you gave me that as an ad budget.
Right? Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah, like that's just like a huge deal. So anyway, we let me get here. So yeah, we can definitely go through inventory planner itself, but let me know, kind of what kind of questions you have, and we can take things from there too.
Yeah, I mean, so we've talked about forecasting, we've talked about overstock, we've talked about, what to do in order to avoid not having stock on hand. Talked about freeing cash flow and things like that, by variance and things like this. I'm just curious, what other options you guys have, and what else can we squeeze out of this to create more positive cash flow cycles for each business?
Yeah, definitely. So this will be appealing to particular kinds of businesses. We have something called open to buy planning, which I see frequently used by fashion companies. So if you are bringing in, let's say, new styles every season, so you're not replenishing exactly what you had before, you need a different approach to figure out how much inventory to purchase. So open to buy is basically a high-level financial planning. So it's at a category level, and we're putting in what our revenue goals are. So that's this planned revenue here. And then we're also telling the system, what's my stock cover going to be? So basically, how long do I want the stock to last? So typically, I'll see this between 2 and 3, meaning 2 and 3 months worth of stock, just because you need more inventory on hand than what people purchase, right? You can't cut it that close. You have to have some extra on hand. So that's just a general guideline. And so open to buy says, okay, with that revenue goal, and you want to have that much inventory, we're already looking at your stock and everything you've purchased. Here's how much additional inventory you need to buy in order to meet your revenue goal. Like, people can't spend their money you can't hit your revenue goal unless you have the inventory for them to spend their money on, is the basic idea of this one. So that's just a really high level look at that one. Here we're looking at it on a, kind of planning on a total basis. We could switch this over to what we call bottom-up planning, which means we're planning on a category by category basis, which I think also makes a lot of sense because these categories are going to have different profit margins, different seasonality. You might want different stock cover, for each of these categories. So you could really dial it in by category. And like I said, fashion companies, especially when they've got people handling purchasing who maybe have been at big stores before and now they're with growing newer e-commerce companies, they're very familiar with open to buy and looking at a tool that can help them. And so we provide that as well. So, so that's one thing. And then, let me back up just a little bit. So Inventory Planner, we integrate with 30 different platforms. And so this can be a nice way if you're selling on, let's say, Shopify and Amazon, very common, right? That somebody might be selling on both of those. So this basically brings it together and says, let's look at the total demand across my sales channels so that I can put in one purchase order to cover all demand with my supplier. So this can be a way for people to just bring that all together and see that information all in one place and managing their purchasing that way. So that's an important point I didn't cover.
Super useful. Goodbye, Excel.
Yeah, exactly. Right, it just can take so long to pull data from all those different data sources. That's something I really commonly hear from people. They just say, I just spend so much time exporting data, putting it together, getting it in the same format, so then I can start to plug my formulas in, so this can save time there too.
Yeah.
In terms of other reporting, I think that I hit on the high points. One other one that I would point out is our Compare Warehouses report. So basically, if you are managing multiple locations, so it could be different retail stores, it could be East Coast, West Coast warehouses, it could be your primary warehouse and sending things to Amazon, whatever those multiple locations or multiple warehouses are. This can be a tool to help figure out what inventory we can transfer. So first we'll select basically our destination warehouse. Where do we want to have the stock end up? Here it's Amazon. Then we can compare it to our primary warehouse and say, okay, how much stock do we have on hand and that won't be needed at that warehouse? So the key here is we don't want to create a problem in our source warehouse just to solve a different problem at the destination, right? We want to say what's available in excess at one place that we can just move it around and optimize it. So this is kind of the next level beyond replenishment and overstock. It's saying, let's truly get it in the right physical spot where people want it as well.
It's super useful.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
One of our businesses, we're having fulfillment centers in multiple countries, and there's always some stock lying around in those fulfillment centers.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, we didn't find an easy way to actually just track all that and optimize the transfers. I think that this is super useful. Is there any simple way to, just for the inventory planner to give you ideas on, hey, move this here, move that here, depending on, like, let's say the volume that's selling on different e-commerce platforms, let's say Amazon or Shopify?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, that's kind of one of the core principles of accurately forecasting as well, is keeping in mind that each of these warehouses or each of these locations has its own kind of personality. Things sell at different rates, different kinds of things sell through different channels. When I was a merchant, we opened up a retail store for a while, and it was totally different than what we sold online. I mean, even entire categories that barely functioned online were our top sellers in the store. It was just upside down. So keep in mind that each of these has its own personality. You'll need to forecast for each one and really dial in what is needed at this location and not just across the store as a general, or across our company as a generalization.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
I love doing those demos because, first of all, we're providing a lot of value to our audience, but I'm actually learning so much. I'm going to start implementing some of those right away.
Yeah, definitely. This is pretty fun stuff to geek out on. I'll show you kind of something that I talked about. We've got this assortment report here. And I talked about our option sets. So if I come here and we can view by option set, this is something we're pulling in automatically from your connection. So here we've got our color option set. If I click on that, then I'll see all the colors that are offered in our store. Here we've got them sorted by revenue, but we could, by units sold, profitability, lots of different metrics here. So this is something that I've used when looking at launching new products, making an initial order from a vendor to say, okay, what should this breakdown look like? Maybe we make a cutoff after green here and say we're not going to mess with these, slower movers. And then we can figure out how many to purchase of each one of these, because we've got a rough idea of what the breakdown there is too. So, forecasting on brand new items, there's a lot of guessing, educated guessing that goes into it. And this can just be one more data point to fill in and make it less of a guess, and more data-based until we get the actual sales information on that particular item.
Gotcha. So those are not actual product categories that you've got, but this is some kind of variable on which you're kind of predicting how the new products will perform, right?
Right, exactly. So this is the particular option here. We can look at it by category as well, or we could even filter by category if we wanted to say, okay, colors within dresses, how does that function? Because we want to make it as close as possible to our new product, so that we have the most number of variables in common to say, here's the past performance that we think will indicate future behavior. So we can really dial that in as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Really cool. I've got another question for you. So we've got a business where we are selling bundles, and each bundle is customizable with different product variants. So let's say we've got 4 variants, we're selling them as a bundle. And then the biggest problem is when we're trying to, plan the scaling is, okay, we know this is the bundle is our best seller. We know that this is how many we need to order for this particular, for this particular point in time. But there's an issue with calibrating, people buying different variants within that bundle. Which option within Inventory Planner would we use for that?
Yeah, so there's a lot. There's a lot that can happen with bundles. We could probably have a whole talk on bundles alone. So just to look at that, we handle a couple different kinds of bundles. So one you can see here is like a 5-pack. And so it's a single unit here that's just going to have 5 of those. And I think about it in terms of the fulfillment process. So if somebody bought an individual black t-shirt versus the 5-pack, we'd go to the same spot in the warehouse and just pick out 5 from the same bin where we'd pick out 1, with those 2 different orders. So that's one type of what we call like a kit or a non-produced bundle. Versus if we have something that maybe is manufactured, it truly needs to be assembled. So we've got components that need to be purchased, but also our final good, needs to be put together well before the customer orders it. We're not doing that at the time of picking and packing. So for us, that's called a produced bundle. We're going to change it to be called an assembly shortly. And so the forecasting function is different for both of those because we consider stock different. We have to think about assembly time, all of those kind of things. But we can see, okay, we're breaking down, here's what goes into those, how many goes into those. And so, we might have a single item that's a component in a lot of different bundles, but for forecasting and ordering purposes, we need to know what's the total demand for that. So the important part in Inventory Planner is when we're back here on the replenishment screen and we've got this variant view, it means all those relationships we were just looking at on the last screen. So all the bundles and all the components are taken into consideration. We've looked at stock levels. And so this is recommending here's how much you need to purchase to meet total demand, whether it's sold on its own or not, whether it's in 10 different bundles. And so that can be super complex to handle through spreadsheets and making sure you're getting it accurately. So our system can really help out with that as well.
Gotcha. Do you guys also, do you deal only with inventory, or also companies that have a manufacturing plant can manage some kind of, ingredients and stuff that's not ready through your app, or is that a completely different solution that we need here?
Yeah, we can handle that. So in our system, we've got something called an IP variant, which just means inventory planner variant. It's a component that's not sold on its own. So it could be like an ingredient. They can make it in inventory planner so that they see how many of that component needs to be ordered. We also integrate with a lot of different platforms that handle, some of them we'll call it a bill of materials. It could be called an assembly in that system. So like Sin7, Deer, Unleashed, TradeGecko, a lot of these kind of inventory management systems do have a manufacturing component. So they already have all those relationships figured out. We bring that in automatically. So there's no additional setup because you've already done it once on your other platform. And then we're helping to say, okay, here's how many of this ingredient you need to purchase overall. So it might be breaking it down. So you're looking at how many grams of that you need to purchase, or, whatever the unit is that makes sense there to meet that total demand.
Awesome. Amazing. Yeah. Cool. So, it sounds like a topic that's so diverse that we could, probably find different use cases for every particular business. But I
definitely.
guess
definitely. And
in particular research that you can recommend for people to learn more about inventory planning, or if they want to know more, how can they contact you?
Yeah, definitely. So you can get a hold of us through our website. So just pop into this chat down here, start chatting with us down here. For more resources, we've got a blog where we try to tackle, both beginner and advanced techniques for managing your inventory, for forecasting demand. We've also got a YouTube channel, so check that out. We've got quite a few quick tips there, as well as how to use inventory planner in general. And then the demo site that I was using, earlier, it's available here on our homepage. So just come to demo. That live site is available anytime. It resets at the top of the hour, so feel free to move things around, do whatever you want to in there. Have at it, and check that out. Feel free to also email, so you can reach us at contact@inventory-planner.com, and we'll get back to you, and we can set up some time to talk, figure out what your replenishment needs are, and kind of figure out what the best solution might be.
Awesome, perfect. So any last thoughts or any last advice for the budding e-commerce entrepreneurs, as well as those more advanced ones doing that are doing, let's say, more than $1 million a month, or more than $1 million annually in revenue?
Yeah. So I think that in e-commerce, I see that we definitely pay a lot of attention to marketing and kind of customer facing items, sometimes to the expense of what's happening behind the scenes. It's a little less sexy, but is critical to your cash flow and making sure that your business stays in business. So, whether you have no system, as was the case for me, or you're doing some forecasting now, I think digging into this and really optimizing can make a huge difference for your business. Reach out. Glad to talk with you about this. As you can tell, I love this stuff, so I'm glad to geek out with anybody about it. Check out some articles and videos that we have too. We're always trying to put out things to help just improve your e-commerce business, make it more efficient, more profitable. And I think that there's some basic techniques that lots of stores can implement and really see a big payoff with that.
Awesome, Jill. Perfect. So thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. I definitely geeked out, and I definitely learned a lot.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for staying till the very end. This was e-commerce scaling strategies by Sales Genomics, brought to you by Matt from Sales Genomics. If you're interested in more tips and strategies on how to scale your e-commerce business, visit our Facebook group called E-commerce Scaling Strategies by Sales Genomics, or follow us on social media.